Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad to see you all. Some really great friends and brilliant minds on this panel. To kick things off, I wanted to just give a little preamble, set a little context. In 2020, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, declared this decade would be the decade of SDG action. 2 years into the decade, this imperative is more urgent than ever. And so this panel will explore how we can scale up action to mitigate the most consequential effects of climate change. Liv, are you gonna unmute?
Yeah, sorry, I'm happy to. So I think we have a pretty short amount of time, so we want to move through this conversation really quickly, but we're super excited to have all of you climate leaders and impact leaders with us today. And with that, I'm going to kick it to Brian.
Awesome. So we're really pleased to have with us today Shantae Harris, the Director of Climate Investment and Partnerships for Second Muse. Say hi. An impact and innovation company that's working vigorously to better the world we live in. They do this by putting people first, boldly challenging themselves to find solutions to complex issues, and fearlessly introducing new ideas that may at times seem impossible. Eric Turner, who's with us from Switzerland, is the co-president at Sustainability Week International. It's an international network for student-led sustainability weeks at higher education institutions, which helps students start their own sustainability week and connects them to change makers all over the world. Then we have Kailyn, my new friend from COP. I just met her in 2020 in Glasgow. And she runs strategy and partnerships for Planet FWD, which empowers brands to save our planet in this decade while creating a just and regenerative future for all beings through providing software that makes it easy to bring more sustainable and carbon neutral products to market. And then we have Peter Dolan, founding partner at Claymate, a global group of experts using AI-enabled planetary computer to provide geointelligence needed to better understand the context and clarity of a world in great change. Claymate also won the 2021 Microsoft AI for Earth Award. So awesome, Peter, to have you here. And I'll hand it back to Olivia to present the first question.
Yeah, we're super happy to have all of you here. Thank you for joining us. In 2 minutes, can you just give us a little bit of context about your work, yourself, and then what personally fuels your passion for scaling climate innovation? I'm going to start with Eric.
All right, thank you very much, Olivia. Well, good evening, everyone from Switzerland. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. If I may start with the last question, I think for me, what's really the fuel for this work has to be the people. Time and time again, I get just surprised by the energy and the passion and the engagement that you meet these young people with. And that gets me up in the morning at times, really, I have to say so. And this is also a bit why I started volunteering about 4 years ago. I was looking for a community of peers to share ideas, the engagement, and to this day is really one of the main motivations. Also, this is why I joined Sustainability Week International. Like you said before, Brian, our main mission is to bring sustainability to every aspect of higher education institutions. And we do this through so-called local sustainability weeks, which is an event set organized by students at their university. And what we do as an organization is help them through fundraising, media, and so on. So that's how we support them specifically.
Thank you.
Love it, Eric. How about we do popcorn? Peter, Shantae, Kailyn, feel free to jump in and just
thanks, yourself. Brian, and really good to see you all and meet some of you. So like Brian said, I'm Peter Dolan. I'm a founding partner of Claymate. We are a small group of risk intelligence professionals, and we've built a risk intelligence platform that we use to provide decision support to global leaders on the most critical issues facing themselves and their businesses, with the #1 risk facing global business leaders and public sector leaders is climate change. And so that ends up being where we spend a lot of our time, focus, and energy. Personally, what I'm passionate about, sort of the passion that drives my work and what we do every day is looking out. The context of this discussion being a decade of action is, I think over the next 10 years, there are somewhere between 200 and 250 decisions that are going to be made that are going to vector the entire course of humanity for the next 10,000 years. And we wake up every day and get to work with some of the people that are making those decisions and are always looking for more of them. So that's what we focus on, and that's my passions. Good to meet you all.
Great
Hey,
having
I'll
you here,
jump
Liz.
in. Yeah, it's really good to be here with friends. My name is Shantae Harris. As Brian and Olivia mentioned, I'm Director of Climate Investment and Partnerships at Second Muse. And really what we aim to do is build future economies that are more inclusive, sustainable, and regenerative. And we do that by focusing on the people, right? The individuals that are building incredible solutions, have incredible ideas. We fund them, we incubate them, and we accelerate them through investment and the appropriate resources. We've been running, just for some examples, Melinda Gates' Pivotal Ventures Get Cities initiative, focused on getting more women into tech. We run Rockefeller Foundation's Food System Vision Prize, which is essentially how do you envision a world where there is no longer food scarcity. And then we also run NASA Space Apps Challenge, which is really focused on open innovation. I'd say what drives me, particularly in the climate work that I do, I run a climate tech venture studio within our portfolio. And really, urban innovation and cross-sector collaboration has been at the core of my career. I come from a family of public servants. My grandmother was a civil rights activist, and I've just always believed that in order to solve any issue, any complex issue, that we have to collaborate, and that means across sectors and industries. And we really have to welcome diversity of thought into every big challenge that we're facing. So it's lovely to be here, excited to be on this stage with every other panelist.
I'm honored to follow up after Shantae, my favorite person in the world, and happy to be here as well. My name is Kailyn of I'm the head of strategy and partnerships at a company called Planet FWD. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, but I think kind of the origin of that work and the why is super important. My background is in ESG and impact investment, and for the last however many years, I built out ESG strategies and helped raise impact funds for large PE funds. And as part of that, I started our climate initiatives work, and I led large PE funds, Vista Equity Partners, Hellman & Friedman, these investors that manage billions of dollars to try to determine how to decarbonize themselves and their portfolios. And I realized, this is great. This is important. This is what needs to happen. But also there's a huge barrier getting from the point of strategy to actual execution when it comes to actually reducing and hitting the goals that we need to under the Paris Agreement. So in the last year and a half, I switched over to the tech side and started building a company called Planet FWD alongside our founder, Julia Collins, that is focused on that, doing the measurement, reduction, offsetting, and net zero planning, specifically focused on the consumer sector, which makes a lot of sense when you think about the fact that 60% of our global emissions actually come from consumer products in some way, shape, or form, from the extraction of raw materials to where they end up in the landfill once we're done with them. So a huge issue to try to tackle, and that's what I'm focused on right now.
Such a rock star panel we have here. And only a short amount of time, so just gonna dive right into the next question. This question is focused on the origin story. What was the genesis of the solution that you're bringing to market? So what is the reasoning or logic that gave rise and initiated the program of work that your team's currently engaged in? Feel free to jump in. Shantae, can I put you on the spot?
Sure. Yeah. Second Muse has an entire theory of change. And I guess to summarize it, so you all won't sit here for hours listening to it, we fundamentally believe that the best way to change the world and have an impact is to really go local and focus on local economies. And so what we do is think about emerging industries and technologies that we believe are going to dominate our economy for the next couple of decades, and we go into communities and we essentially launch new programs, new ventures that support the emerging industries that are ultimately going to be the driver of jobs, right? Upward economic mobility. And we do that by focusing on the talent, but then also focusing on the ecosystem around them. Historically, most people would probably argue that tech and venture and investment has benefited a lot from whether it's incubators, accelerators, mentors, people who take the time to really support founders, but haven't had to invest in that. And so we fundamentally believe that there's an opportunity to shift that narrative and say, hey, not only can we build better founders, but we can build better ecosystems that support people across communities and also allow for greater returns. So that's really the ethos of everything that we do, believing that return and impact don't have to be at odds with one another. And actually, by thinking about collaboration, we can essentially bring more solutions to market and have a greater impact. So the last thing I'll say on that is, we launched a climate tech venture studio about a year ago. And everything that we've done since then for the climate space has been not only identifying the best global founders, but also building a really diverse, incredible community of mentors and investors to support them as they scale.
I'll hop in next. Yeah, I think when it comes to the logic behind Planet Forward, we really are following the numbers, whereas they're just opportunity for outsized impact. I mentioned before, 60% of global emissions come from the consumer industry. We actually started out in food and beverage as our main focus, which is responsible for 30 to 40% of global emissions within our food system. But what's really, really cool specifically about food and supply chains is right now we're doing everything pretty much wrong. But if we tweak things a bit, we can actually heal the planet through moving towards regenerative farming practices in the way that we grow our food, moving towards circular use of our raw materials and our packaging, and all of the ways that we currently live such destructive and consumptive and wasteful lives, but we can actually really flip all of that on its head to move towards a more sustainable future in the way that we need to. And when it came to really building the software behind Planet Forward, we actually started out by launching our own brand. It's a brand called Moonshot Snacks. It was the first fully climate-friendly snack brand to hit the market. And when we say fully climate-friendly, it has fully regeneratively grown inputs, fully recycled packaging, fully carbon-neutral operations. And it was actually really difficult to do that. And we realized, there's all of these specific steps that you would want to take, but it's not easy to take them. And so we put all of that kind of challenge and learning into a software to make it extremely easy for other brands to bring sustainable and carbon neutral products to market. So the logic was, hey, we found this problem that we ourselves had. How do we solve that for others to make it easier to do the right thing?
Thanks, Kailyn. I'll go ahead here. And so I think our origin story comes from a rise in the proliferation of information technologies that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, everything from the commercialization of low Earth orbit satellites to quantum computing and sort of everything in between. So we now have more information on the world than we ever have had before. And there's a real gap in our ability to understand that, aggregate it, use it to provide decision support for really anything. There's been a lot of talk about big data, but it has often not been really applied to specific use cases around really elegant decision support around critical issues. And then secondly, sort of at the same time, we have a rise in complexity in the world in general, across almost any dimension. The story of the last 50 years has been really a rise in complexity, and particularly in climate. So what we're talking about today, it's what we like to call a hyperobject. It's something that's so complicated, so complex, so vast, and invisible and visible in a lot of ways that it as the human mind really can't comprehend it. And so you need decision support from a computer to really be able to integrate all of the various impacts that climate is going to have on your business or your country or whatever the realm of your decision may be. And so we saw a real opportunity in that to build a process that has been tested in order to provide decision support and help leaders understand the scenarios that they need to make decisions to accomplish their goals of improving the world, improving conditions for life on Earth, for us and for future generations.
How about you, Eric? Awesome.
Thanks. So the first sustainability week took place in 2013 in Zurich, and it was born really out of the realization that universities weren't talking about sustainability much at all. And so the students really had a call to action and said, hey, we can do something about this. We can create an engagement and create a space for students, academia, but also society at large to have a meeting point and start talking about this. And I think this is a second point, which is very interesting, which I have come to realize, that universities, but higher education institutions at large are a critical space within society for change, where we can together experiment and understand how can we evolve together, right? And this is the role very much for the Sustainability Week, to hold that space together for all the stakeholders to come in together.
That's, you don't know this, but that is the absolute best segue into our next question, where we're trying to figure out, you know, in this environment in which sustainability is now becoming kind of mainstream, is definitely in danger of being, you know, kind of leveraged by people who aren't actually upholding sustainability, you know, sustainability principles. We're wondering, you know, how are you thinking about scale in terms of building sustainable solutions? How are you thinking about scaling your own initiatives? How are you thinking about whether or not sustainability can scale in general? And then, you know, would love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's start with Kailyn.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our approach to scale is very simple, and it's very inherent to what we're doing. So when it comes to climate action, to implementation, to reduction, it's kind of a world where you can't manage what you can't measure. And so our approach to scale is to make measurement accessible to all companies. It's actually one of the metrics that Planet FWD tracks, is around accessibility. Previously, when it comes to determining your carbon GHG inventory, running a product lifecycle assessment, those are extremely burdensome processes that were done by consultants, and they were really expensive, or they were done with software that was only available to enterprise companies. Planet FWD has simplified that, and we have, you know, developed a software that's available to brands of all sizes and all stages, which is really, really exciting. And so we actually hope to see a future where measurement, carbon accounting, is commoditized. We want the access to the information that you need to be able to make impactful decisions as to how to reduce your carbon footprint and how to get to net zero, a commonplace consideration for every single company. And we see accessibility and cost as a core driver of that. So we're working on making our software as good as it can be, and getting the cost down as low as they can, so that all companies can do this. And as long as we get in front of as many as we can, then that hopefully that'll work out.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think building off of that, and you know, Kailyn, knowing her personally, really is an ESG expert, so I'm sure she could talk for hours about that. But you know, on our end, we think a lot about our early stage technologies. I think it's no secret, right, that companies have come out, particularly I think in the tech space, saying they're sustainable and climate companies, which I think is an amazing thing, right? It's not meant to say don't do those things, but it's like, how do we have intention and back up, right, what we're saying we are in this space? And it really does matter in terms of impact and metrics. So what we do is actually walk all of our very early stage founders through a sustainable manufacturing process assessment, where we work hands-on with them to think about not impact in the future, but actually impact embedded into the way that they build and prototype and ultimately deploy their technologies. So I think the intention has to be there from the start. It can't be something that we're looking at later down the line. And I think on the investment side, because we do have an entire investment arm at Second Muse, we're actually right now really thinking through a $500 million basically fund of funds. That's a social fund that not only invests in funds, but also invests in technologies themselves. And what we're doing in that process is running a design lab for other investors to call them in, right? Not call people out, but call them into the work of impact and sustainability by saying, hey, what do we need to standardize for investors, particularly emerging investors and new investors that are curious, so that they can feel, not only like there's a way to be accountable, but also they have the resources to really, measure what it means to invest in this space. So yeah, I think if that's you or it sounds interesting to you, would certainly love to connect. I think we're just starting to scratch the surface, to be honest, and there's so much opportunity to do better, but also do it together.
I think scale is an interesting question. I'll approach it from two ways. First, with our work, and then second, from sort of a macro sense in the sort of the realm of sustainability. So, we're an interesting beast in that we don't really have ambitions of scale. We're really focused on working with a small group of partners that we think we can provide a lot of value for, whose decisions then have the scale that we want, whether it's working across supply chain or global finance or a public institution. So that's really where our focus is. And as a business, I have no real intention of growing or hockey stick growth, or so we have raised no VC and don't really have any outside investors that we have to put magical charts in front of and all that. And then second, I think for the larger sustainability realm, I do have some concerns. I think that right now it's proliferated to a point where it's absolutely everywhere. It's particularly in my background, sort of in financial services, and we're seeing everyone's got an ETF or a new strategy that is ESG, and they're starting to get hammered in the markets, and people are pulling out of them, and it's creating a sort of a bad taste in the mouths of investors around the world. And then you sort of couple that with the understanding of global risk that we're facing, likely a asset bubble burst that will which that's the future. And right now we're sort of in this period of historic liquidity and global peace, and we still really aren't acting, taking the necessary actions. I'd be remiss to say if I wasn't a little bit concerned about what the future looks like and the level of seriousness with which people take sustainability issues going forward over the next decade.
For Sustainability Week, we have scaled already in Switzerland to almost 15 of the major cities here in Switzerland. And 2 years ago, we further diversified. So there's Sustainability Week International that aims to really reproduce this model that was so successful in Switzerland. And we have about 50 cities now that are active throughout the world, with many, I have to say, in Africa. But also we have a Sustainability Week for business, so that businesses now still only at the Swiss level can focus and have events and drive them together with students to have that engagement around sustainability. And regarding partnering from this year, what we really aim to focus on is partnering with organizations like STSN Youth, because ultimately you can think about sustainability as a bit of a franchise, right? So if you have a team, a local team that would like to engage further with sustainability, we can be there and provide the infrastructure to make that happen, really.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We only have a few minutes left, so we definitely want to make sure that this conversation is actionable and doesn't die at the end of this hour. And so we're wondering, what are the ways that we as a captive audience can be supportive of your initiatives, of your goals, and how can we engage in the work that you're doing? Let's do a minute each. Can we start with Peter?
Sure. Thanks, Olivia. Yeah, so I think we're really looking for, like I said, partners that need decision support, that are really grappling with the issues, that are curious about global risk and what they can do, what it means for their business, and are willing to go down what's really a difficult and challenging route of trying to understand the world as it is and make good decisions based on that. And so that sounds like anyone here would love to continue the conversation, and we're really excited about the work that we do and what we can do for our partners. So we'd love to continue the conversation, and I think we can share contacts through Brian and Olivia, and appreciative of the time here today.
Thank you.
I'm gonna jump right in. So we are looking always for motivated volunteers. So if you're someone that has a bit of extra time and would like to engage with education around sustainability, we're happy to have you. Also, if you know about a group of students that are engaged and would like to push sustainability further in their curricula at school, we're also there to help them. So do reach out to let us know. You have the contacts.
Mute myself. I think I mentioned this earlier, but we are actively sourcing amazing solutions and founders across the globe right now to support through our Climate Tech Venture Studio. So if that's you or you know an incredible person, it can be a researcher, a scientist, a technologist, an engineer that's building a climate tech solution or is interested in how to do so, would love to hear them and have them apply. I'll drop the link also in the chat so folks have it. And then if you're an investor and you're figuring out your climate theses or looking to invest, or excuse me, actually talk to other investors that are also investing in this space, would love to collaborate with you about the design lab I mentioned earlier.
Come join Nova.
I'll just, first of all, hype Shantae and truly suggest that you take her up on that. They've been able to achieve just outsized outcomes for the companies within their cohorts. So huge proponent of what they're doing. When it comes to me and Planet Forward, I'd say we're really in a unique space given that we focus on the consumer products industry, because each and every individual can play a role. When I was doing ESG work, one of the kind of big levers we had to influence companies, Fortune 500 companies, on changing their practices and changing their decisions internally was reputational risk. That's a true risk and a true impact on the financial viability of a company, on stakeholder concerns, all of these things. And so cancel culture is actually something that can work in our favor when it comes to climate action. If you're engaging, or if you see brands that aren't holding up their end of the bargain when it comes to sustainability, their practices, their sourcing, their materials, whatever it be, call them out for it, or call them in, as Shantae said. I think we've seen really the power of social media within the BLM movement to hold executives accountable for the decisions that they make with their businesses. And in the same way that we, have expected better performance when it comes to diversity and when it comes to being a genuine human around racism, we should expect the same for climate. We should expect companies and we should expect executives to protect the earth. So I would say that every single individual has a role to play just as a consumer and voting with their dollars and voting with their voice. And then beyond that, to the extent that anyone in the audience has connections with companies that are looking for carbon measurement, looking for net zero planning, looking for reduction strategies, that's what we do, and we do it really, really well. So happy to even talk if it's exploratory, because I can probably help. Yeah, those are the things from me.
Love it. So inspiring. What an amazing crew. When we think about scaling sustainability initiatives to support climate action, we can learn from experiences of these powerful leaders, and moving forward, we want to ensure that we keep these conversations going and that we continue to build the supportive ecosystem to help organizations like theirs to scale. So please, we invite all of you panelists and speakers to use the chat box and drop your contact details or web links or anything where people can contact you and to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I know we're super out of time, but the last thing I'll add is that, it's been such a joy getting to know these people, the people on this panel and the people who have been speaking throughout the day. And I think that there's so much power in collaborating and coming together and talking about the challenges of fighting or creating climate change solutions and figuring out what the investment space looks like and doing this all together. So really honored to have you all with us today. And we would love to continue the conversation and continue to highlight the work that you all are doing. So thank you guys so much. You're the best.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Olivia. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for having us.
Good to meet
Thanks,
you all.
Brian. Thanks, Olivia. This was great.
You're all so amazing.